All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Erin, and I want to take this moment to welcome everybody to our wellness webinar for tonight. So I see we still have some people coming in. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So tonight, I'm pleased to introduce Mike Masse. Mike is a mindfulness consultant, public speaker, and therapist who specializes in mindfulness-based stress reduction. For over a decade, he has been teaching adults, youth, and children mindfulness skills to help reduce their levels of stress and anxiety. Mike has become a highly sought-after trainer, facilitating workshops with educators, first responders, healthcare providers, and others who work in high-stress environments. So Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and I will let you take the floor.
Hey, thank you so much. And at any time, if anyone has a question, you can just fire it away during this entire workshop. I would actually prefer that if you have a question, you can ask live, and then Erin can read it out to me, and we can kind of have a discussion pertaining to that question. So before I go into what mindfulness is or what it isn't, I think it's very important we start looking at why buy into mindfulness. And for me, personally, mindfulness completely shifted how I see and how I work. You know, I worked in social work and social services for years. I worked at Children's Aid, where, you know, at the age of 25, I was legal guardian of 19 children. And that job was incredibly stressful. You know, I would go to work, and I had an amazing team and amazing manager, but I found that I was always at work. Even when I wasn't in the office clinically, I was at work at home. I'd be thinking about, you know, a case, or I'd be thinking about a child I was working with. And I found that I was constantly on my mind, you know, constantly thinking about work. On my drive into work, thinking about work. On my drive home from work, thinking about work. And that didn't stop. You know, when I moved from Barrie to Stratford, where I currently reside now, that worry just shifted to something else. So then I worked in addictions, and I found the same thing was happening, that I was always very future oriented, thinking about what might happen or what could happen, or I'd go into the past and play what should have happened. So for me, I started getting into mindfulness via yoga. I was doing some yoga, more for the health benefits, and I started to find that my mind wasn't as active as it normally is. So I found for little moments, my mind wouldn't have that cadence of for maybe 7 or 10 seconds at a time. It would be slower. So I started to invest some of my time and energy into mindfulness, and, you know, which I typically view now as purposely paying attention. So I started putting some energy into this, but it took me 3 years of creating and starting and stopping a practice, because mindfulness is hard. It's very hard. And for me, I fully bought into mindfulness after I did about an 8-week course where I systematically trained my brain over time. And that's what I do now full time. So for the last almost 6 years full time, I've been teaching meditation. I work currently right now with 11 hospitals. I work with school boards from Parry Sound to Windsor. I do a lot of consulting, not only in Ontario, but a lot of in Canada, some in the States, on looking at how we can bring mindfulness practically to our life. You know, the most common experience that I have when I start teaching mindfulness is with clients is that they say they can't meditate because they don't have the time, or they can't meditate because their mind is too busy. And my response always is that if your mind is having thoughts, that's a good thing, because it means you're alive. Meditation isn't this thing where we're not thinking. You know, for me, when I'm looking at the practice, from my experience, the practice is purposely paying attention to whatever is there without manipulating it. So what does that mean in a practical way? Well, if we're paying attention to our breath, so we start with our breath, and we're watching our breath, and then we have a thought, and that thought can be future oriented, or it can be past oriented. So let's say it's future oriented. Well, I'm thinking about my 4 o'clock meeting. So when you're in this moment, watching this breath, and your mind has a thought about the future, we identify that as a future thought, and then we bring our awareness right back to the breath. And then our mind goes, okay, that's great. We're at the breath for about 7 to 10 seconds. Let's go to the future again. Or let's go to the past and think about what we should have done or what we could have done. Cool. Notice that as a thought, and then we bring our awareness right back to our breath in this present moment. And this is a constant battle. You know, meditation is not this thing, especially when we start, where you're like all zenned out and things are so calm and your eyes open and you've seen unicorns and daisies and you're like, wow, I'm so relaxed now. That was profound. Wrong. At the start, it's hard and it's fairly boring. And I know this is not the best sales pitch, but the reality is your mind has up to 70,000 thoughts a day that are just going. And because of, this thing, or because of, iPads or video games, we're used to just being constantly overwhelmed by stimulation. So for all of a sudden for us to sit purposely and pay attention to something is very foreign. What I teach for a living is actually counterintuitive to how we're wired. When you're having a hard day or a rough day, or you're sad or frustrated or angry, and I'm asking you to sit with that emotion for 5 or 10 minutes, you're naturally going to have a pushback of that. And that's normal. When we're looking at what mindfulness is, I like to start with what it isn't. Mindfulness isn't not having thoughts. It's the ability to notice that you're thinking. It's the ability to note what is happening without manipulating that thought or that breath. So before, I talked about the first anchor of mindfulness, which is your breath. So we're watching our breath. In about 7 to 10 seconds, you're going to have an idea about how boring this is or how you don't want to do this, and your mind's going to go off. We notice that and we come right back to the breath. Now that gets pretty boring because you get these thoughts coming in constantly, thoughts, or emotions coming up. We identify those and come back to the breath. That's called an anchor. So your first anchor in the practice is your breath. The second anchor you can use is your body. This is where I typically start when I'm working with adults. So we start by purposely paying attention to one thing. We bring our awareness to that. And then when our mind or energy shifts, and by energy I mean your thoughts, words, or deeds, when it shifts, we identify that shift and come right back. Every time you bring your awareness back to the present moment, it's a repetition, no different than the gym. No different. And the more reps you do over and over again, the stronger your mind becomes at purposely paying attention. Oh, but Mike, why is this so important? Well, let me tell you. When you can practice this in the morning or at night on your bench or on your meditation mat or in your bed, you then can use and implement this in real life. Like, to me, I do not practice meditation because I love meditation. I practice meditation because what meditation has brought me. And meditation has brought me the ability to be present with my two humans who I love. Recently I was reading to my 5-year-old Bo. We were reading this Dog Man book, and my mind was with him. And he was laughing and having this great experience. And for about 30 seconds, I was like, I am with him in this moment. And that's a benefit of this practice. Another benefit from the byproduct of having regular practice, and by practice I mean a meditation, is that you're able to address the emotions currently as they are without adding to them. Most professionals I work with, be it if they're in sales, or if it's a physician, or if it's a lawyer, or if it's many of the school boards I work with, most people are spending their time rehearsing or rehashing. So rehearsing what they're going to say at their 9:30 meeting. So the next time you're in the shower, perhaps ask yourself, where are you? Are you actually in the shower or at your meeting? When you're brushing your teeth, are you actually brushing your teeth? Are you thinking about the stuff that you have to do with your kids after school? Are you in the car driving? Or are you in the car getting ready for what might happen? Or are you rehearsing what you will say at said meeting? Or are you rehashing what you should have said? What you could have said in the past? So for me, when we're looking at bringing the practice of mindfulness, it's not about starting your day with a practice and ending your day with a practice. That's training so you can use the practice, the benefit of mindfulness. You can use that at work or at school or with your children in particular. So when you're with people who you actually want to be with, you can be there instead of being on this thing, going to wherever you're going. So I believe the best place to start is by doing a gentle practice in the morning. So one, you're going to have an inordinate amount of resistance to meditating. That's completely normal. Two, you're going to feel like it's not going to work for me. Three, you're going to have all these thoughts come in. I would like for you to start to look at these thoughts as just thoughts and not facts. So the first practice I'd like to start with is what I deem or identify as gratitude practice. So throughout this, for these 40 minutes or so that I'll be talking, I'm going to do a couple practices to show what it looks like. I'll guide them, but everything is completely free and available on my website, mindfulmike.ca, which I'll go over at the end of the talk. But everything we do tonight, or whenever you read this, or watch this, is available 100% for free on my site. I do that for a reason. There's no excuse for you not to practice. If you don't like my voice, cool. Go to YouTube, get an app like Calm or Headspace. You can, do some free trials with that. But my site is meant to be free, so you can use it. And there's children meditations. So if you want to meditate with your kids, you can do that as well. So the first practice to start with is called the gratitude practice. And typically this practice is 3 to 4 minutes. On my site, it's 4 minutes. And it's what I like to do is you start your day with gratitude. It's very easy to wake up and to go right into the future of what might happen throughout the day. And your brain is hardwired to notice the negative and to avoid the negative. So what I like to do is start my day purposely paying attention to 1 to 3 things that I'm grateful for. Because the idea with that is that as you go in through the rest of your day, your brain starts to pick up on things that are similar too. So just like if you get a new car or a truck or a vehicle, and then you're driving that vehicle around town and you realize, hey, there's someone down my street that has that vehicle. Why is that? Well, your brain is paying attention to something similar too. This is for many agencies when I'm brought in, when the morale is negative, people come in looking for 1 or 2 things that are negative, and they start seeing the negative, and they talk about the negative, and that narrative grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. So I like to start the day with the purposely paying attention to what we're grateful for. So if you're okay with this, just allow your eyes to close. I'll just guide you in a brief practice. So when we first start, you just want to find a comfortable position. So usually an erect spine alerts an erect body, an erect mind. So just allow your eyes to close. And all I'd like you to do is just first bring your awareness to someone that you're grateful for that's in your life, or something that you're grateful for in your life. And then you purposely take a deep breath in. And as you breathe in, you think of this person, this place, or thing. And then as you breathe out, you focus on that breath going out. And then again, as you breathe in, you purposely bring into your awareness that person that you're grateful for, or that resonates with your heart. And then as you breathe out, you're focusing on that breath going out. And just one more time, breathing in, thinking about this person, place, or thing. And then as you breathe out, purposely paying attention to your breath going out. Okay, now just allowing your eyes to open. So for some of you that maybe felt like that was really quick, and for others that maybe felt like it was hours. And wherever you're at, totally fine. It's not one practice that changes your mind or how your mind's hardwired. It's subtle practices over time have a significant impact in your well-being. So if half the people watching this are into trying this practice out, that half that gives this practice a try, and let's say they wake up, and at the end I'll talk about what my recommendations are for a practice, but let's say you start with your practice. And you wake up in the morning and do a gratitude practice, and then we do a practice before bed. Those people that have a regular practice of mindfulness, at the end of 8 weeks, so roughly meditating, let's say 12 to 25 minutes a day, at the end of 8 weeks, what ends up happening is those people who have been meditating and who have been practicing, at the end of those 8 weeks, they see a reduction in their blood pressure, a reduction in their resting heart rate, a reduction in the bad cholesterol, a reduction in your activity in your amygdala, and the ability to respond to stress versus have a stress reaction, which to me is a pretty profound experience. When you're able to choose how you respond versus have a natural reaction, especially as a parent or especially working with people for a living, it can radically shift how you handle your emotions. You know, for most people that I work with for a living, what they do constantly is give out, give out, give out, give out, give out, give out. And what ends up happening is they go home and they're still giving out. So they're giving out to their children, to their loved ones, to their siblings, to their aging parents, to their friends. And they're just giving out, giving out, giving out, giving out. The practice of mindfulness is a slow practice that you can fill your cup up daily. It's not this thing where if you are stressed or you're worried about finances or you're worried about sales this quarter, it's not about you close your eyes, you think happy thoughts, you open your eyes, and now everything is great. That's not reality. The reality is, if you are holding something tight or tense, like this, let me actually grab something. So if you're holding, I have this mindfulness jar. This is a workshop with kids. So let's say you have this jar, and this jar for you represents anger, frustration, resentment. And you hold it like this. And you're walking around and you tell Debbie at work that you're really frustrated, and then she confirms that, and you hold it even tighter and tighter and tighter. You can hold the same substance lighter. Instead of walking around holding it like this, you can start to soften your grip on it and maybe hold it a little lighter. This has a dramatic effect on your well-being, a dramatic effect. If you were to visit Stratford, let's say, and where I live, and all of a sudden I jump out, I'm like, hey, person on the internet that saw me talk, all of a sudden, there's another prop I have for my kids talk, so I'll use it. All of a sudden, your heart rate that was nice and relaxed, me jumping out, it does this. You know, when we're in a state of stress, our vitals go up, and it just goes. But this isn't only when you're at immediate risk of me jumping out and saying, hey. This also happens when you are sitting at your desk worrying about a loved one at home. If you are worried about your relationship, or if you're worried about a child, you know, my children are 8 and 5. My worries are, I have worries for them, but of radical different worries when they're adults and they're 18 and or 25. But thinking about those loved ones or thinking about stress, that thought turns into emotion fairly quickly, and our vitals start picking up. You know, my wife is a physiotherapist, and she commutes 3 days a week for work. And sometimes when the weather is really bad, and I, in the morning, say, hey, honey, I don't really think you should go to work. The road reports are bad. And she goes, I'm not canceling 17 patients. And I go, okay. And then she drives to work, and hey, I made it safe, cool. And then all of a sudden, you know, she's usually home at 6:30. And then she's not home, and I call her, and it goes to voicemail. My mind starts having these thoughts, and they're not like, oh, I'm sure she's fine thoughts. They're anxious-based thoughts. So as I start worrying about what might happen to my wife, this starts happening. You know, when your heart rate picks up and your cadence of thought picks up, good luck. The practice of mindfulness is one thing to do to say, okay, I'm worried that she's in an accident. That's thought. Until I hear that she's in an accident, that's fact. So helping yourself discern, one, how we hold this emotion tight, or can I soften my grip on it? Doesn't mean let it go, but can you soften your grip on it? And two, are these thoughts I'm having, are they thoughts or are they facts? So starting to use your ability to discern between thought and fact, or discern how you hold it or loosen it or soften it, is a byproduct of someone who has a regular practice of mindfulness. And again, from my perspective and the work that I do, this isn't a thing where you need to shave your head, move to the monastery, and commit the next 6 years of your life so you can be present. You can start by doing this gratitude practice in the morning. The next practice I'm going to recommend that we do is called the PEM, physical, emotional, mental check-in. I started working with a group of physicians, and I started to implement this PEM, the physical, emotional, mental check-in, when physicians would go and see like 27 to 32 patients a day. And I had them, between each patient, ask themselves, how am I doing physically? how am I doing emotionally, and how am I doing mentally? These 3 questions. This wasn't a thing between each patient where they had 5 minutes and they could sit down, close their eyes, and have a quick practice. This is what we call an informal practice. You are informally using this through your day. You can use these tools of mindfulness patient to patient. Why is that important? Well, with most people I work with, if they have an issue at 9:30 with somebody, be it a patient or a customer or a peer or someone in admin or a VP or someone working for them, it's very likely that they're carrying that emotional weight with them at 12:30. And if they haven't processed it and they still feel that heaviness of it, then it's very likely that they're carrying it at 4:30 and 6:30 and then maybe at 3:33 in the morning. And they wake up with their mind going, again, busy, 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 busy. But for you to purposely pay attention to how you feel somatically, so physically, how you feel with, or what your experience is emotionally, and what your experience is mentally, allows you to say, hey, we know what this is. Because if you never address it, it starts stacking up and stacking up and stacking up and getting heavier and heavier and heavier. So it isn't the final plate that's put on your stack of plates that is really going to blow things up. It's that you have 24 things now that you're carrying. So the practice really is created to help us identify what is actually here and how we're experiencing it physically, emotionally, and mentally. So let's do a brief practice. Let's do the formal practice, which means I guide it. So let's do a formal practice just very quickly. So allow your eyes to close again, please. So again, just getting comfortable as you can. And now just allowing yourself to find your posture. And you're going to notice right away that your mind goes to sound. And that sound could be sound from that's happening around you, or that could be internal sound, thoughts. So just have yourself now purposely bring your awareness to asking yourself, how am I doing right now physically? So what is my experience right now physically? So mine right now is I feel fairly rested. So yours might be rested or relaxed, or maybe there could be this sense of maybe you feel tight or tense or tired. But again, whatever we have, we're not going to manipulate. We're just going to notice that. And then we're going to do a brief scan and ask ourselves, what's my experience right now emotionally? What's my experience right now emotionally? So for me, it's very neutral. There's also a little bit of angst that I have no idea who's watching this and what they're thinking. So my mind notices that. And I just come back to my very neutral experience emotionally, reminding ourselves that emotions are typically held in the chest or stomach, but they also can be held in the jaw, shoulders, back, neck. And then the last experience is, what's my experience right now mentally? So is your mind having thoughts of the future, thoughts of the past? Or does your mind feel fairly present in this moment, or fairly busy, or bored even? And then what I'd like to have you do is I would like you to think of a time, the last time that you remember that you felt angry, frustrated, hurt, mad, upset, whatever comes to mind. So we're going to bring this forward. And then I would like you to ask yourself again, what's my experience in that moment when you think about it? What was your experience physically then? So for me, I feel this like tightness in my chest and my hands. So identify that as anger. And again, we're not trying to change this anger. We're just radically accepting or acknowledging in this moment you're experiencing this. And then we're asking ourselves, what's my experience emotionally? So just taking inventory and asking yourself, what's my experience emotionally? So for me, again, it's in my chest and I can feel this kind of anger bubbling. And then lastly, we go into the mindset. So what's my experience mentally? So just taking a checklist or inventory of what your experience is mentally when you put yourself back in that last time when you're angry, frustrated, or upset. So in that time, my mind felt that it was very future oriented, but also gathering information from the past. And then now just allowing eyes to open. So in real time, this practice is about you going into what is actually happening. I'm just going to draw something for you all. As a human, we experience being a human in 3 ways. So let's say, there we go. So as a human, we experience being a human in 3 ways. And the first one is thought. So for thoughts, if you close your eyes, and for thoughts, if you start to think of your name, half of you, statistically, are going to see your name in writing. So you're actually going to see your name in writing. The other half, you're going to hear your name. You're actually going to hear your name. And this is how we experience thoughts mainly. We experience thoughts in the form of sound or visually. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. The next way that we experience being a human is emotionally. Usually emotion is held here or here, but of course we can experience anger in our fists, especially for men, and especially young men. We can experience anger or frustration in your jaw. But for most of us, anxiety, love, nervousness, guilt, shame are held in the chest or stomach. And then the last way we experience being this human is physically. So if you think of your body now sitting or resting on the chair, your mind goes to your body sitting on the chair. Now you've been sitting on the chair, maybe listening to me blab for 28 minutes already. But is this the first time you've actually purposely brought your awareness to that? So when we experience being a human, and let's say that you wake up in the morning and you feel sad, which is completely okay because you're a human, and sometimes humans feel sad. So you're feeling this sadness and it's in your chest. What we typically do is we go up in the form of thought and ask yourself, why? Why am I sad? And what this does automatically is it lets you, instead of working with the emotion that is currently here, it makes you go up into the thought and start figuring out, why am I sad? So why are you sad? I don't know, maybe it's because of work, or maybe because it's finances, or maybe it's because of my parent, or maybe it's because of my partner, or maybe it's because of my boss. And we start trying to figure out the why to this emotion. In the practice of meditation, what we would do is we would purposely pay attention and work with the sadness. We would work right in the center of the heart where your sadness is. Why do we do this, you ask? Good question. If this, let's say, let's say you're dealing with this emotion to the power of 10. And this emotion is sadness. As soon as you get thought involved, we start adding this together. So instead of dealing with 10 units of suffering, what we do is we combine them, and now we have 100 units of suffering. So you can think about this fairly easy. When you're anxious, nervous, or upset, and instead of working with that emotion in your body, and you go to your mind and start making up reasons for why you're anxious or why you're sad, it usually does not dissipate that energy. It actually usually makes it worse. And then you can feel it physically. You can literally feel it in your stomach or your chest and more. And then guess what happens? Your vitals pick up and pick up and pick up and pick up. So this is a perfect example of you wake up in the morning and there's something going on in your chest and you're anxious or sad, and then you go in your mind and try to figure it out. This happens. And then soon enough, maybe your belly hurts or you literally feel sick. The point of having this practice and why I go into this is that we can identify each thing in its single moment and go, okay, right now I'm sad, and that's okay. What I would ask is, one of the principles of mindfulness is that we treat things with equanimity. So when you're sad, it's okay to be sad. That's just like it's okay to be happy. No one comes into my office ever and says, Mike, I have been so happy the last 3 weeks. Everything's going great in my life, and I don't know why. I wake up and I have this big grin, and I have a little extra jump to my step, but they come and say, I know I feel really sad lately, or I feel really down, I don't know why. And most people are not treating their emotions with equanimity. It is okay to be sad. It is okay to be frustrated. It is okay to be angry. But how we hold that anger is on you. This is why I'm so passionate about working with kids in daycares and JK, SK, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. So that they know that it's okay to have anxiety, and it's okay to be worried or afraid. It's okay to experience sadness. But what are some tools that we can use? What are some tools to soften this? And for most people watching this, what I would highly recommend is that we start being a little selfish. For most of my experience is that people are burnt out because they have 1,000 things on the go. They have a business or a career, and they have a family, and they find it really hard to discern or how to spend their time between career and family. I totally get it. But they're not talking or treating themselves in the way that they would treat someone who they love. And this, to me, is, I think, of all the things I say tonight, if you like anything, but I think the most important to me is the practice of self-compassion.
Mike, could I just jump in and ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, so sorry, because I feel like this comes up a lot when I'm talking to others about mindfulness. Not that I'm by any means an expert, but you mentioned approaching those feelings and those emotions with equanimity and like just being with them. Of course, I think the way I interpret it is like not judging them. And I know a big thing that often I get asked is about the thoughts, because often people, when they start meditating, they don't, before they began meditating, they didn't realize all the thoughts that were swirling in their head. They didn't realize how many were there. They can't believe how many are there and how random they are and how varied they are. And often people say, I can't believe I think so much. And I can't believe how ridiculous these thoughts are. And essentially they start judging the thoughts. And what do you tell people when they get hung up on how busy their mind is and how crazy it is, and that it doesn't seem to make any sense? Because I think often people think it's unique to them.
Right, and it's not. They're human. So what I have them do is what one of my teachers told me to do is invite it in for a tea, or whatever you like. And because when you have a thought and you go, I'm not supposed to think this thought, and you resist that thought, the next thought that comes in, you look as, oh no, I'm really screwing up this practice. And because that we're already incredibly mean to ourselves, you looking at this and saying, I'm not doing it right, or that this is wrong, essentially, we don't do things that we're not great at. That's why it took me 3 years to get into a practice, because I'm fairly good at what I like to do. So then I would sit in the silence and think I'm not doing this right. But there's no such thing as doing it right or wrong. If you are let's say you're going to my website, putting your earbuds in and pressing play, you're doing it right. And what ends up happening, which is very common in this practice, that's a great question. We start this practice with a match in this old house, and we're kind of going around. And then as you start to practice, that match becomes a candle. And as you continue to practice, the candle becomes like a lantern, and all of a sudden all the lights are on. So all these stuff that you've been kind of shoving down for the last 26 years starts to come up. So the first thing I say to people in my private practice is the downside of awareness is awareness. Okay? And the upside to awareness is awareness. But for me, the benefit of being aware in the positive outweighs the benefit of the negative. And if anything, it develops that mechanism to respond. Right? If you start practicing, you will be inundated with thoughts. Usually for the first week or two, this is the honeymoon experience. We're like, oh, I'm going to do that thing that Mindful Mike guy said, and it's going to be like amazing. And my cholesterol is going to be lowered, and my blood pressure is going to be lowered, and I'll be more present. And then you meditate and you realize how friggin' boring it is. And you realize how crazy your mind is. And you realize that you're never present and that you're always thinking about crap that's not even happening, that might happen. And you're like, whew, and people stop. I usually meet with people, give them a month, then they come back and meet with me again. And after meet with me the second or third time, they're like, I haven't been practicing. And I'm like, not shocked. It's not fun to sit with this wonky energy. It's not fun to sit with fear. It's not fun to sit with, hey, I've been really mean to myself for the last 36 years. It's not fun. But if you look at it as a training and as a workout for your mind, and you don't put it to this like fluffy, I'm going to see rainbows and unicorns thing that most people are teaching it as, the problem with mindfulness right now, in my experience, is that it's blowing up, which has been great for my business. But also, we have a lot of people teaching mindfulness who don't meditate, which is like me opening a chef school, and I've like read a couple of cookbooks. Right? There's a radical difference to someone who's teaching mindfulness from experience versus theory. Right? And when we're looking at what mindfulness is, it's an experiential learning experience. It is not something we can read about. You can read all the books you want about mindfulness. It's not going to make you present. This is something that takes this training of your mind. So when someone says, hey, I've been meditating and this stuff has come up from 12 years ago, I think that, yeah, this makes sense. It wants to be dealt with. Most people have been shoving these beach balls down in their pool for years, and then all of a sudden they start popping up. Currently I'm working with this gentleman who's 88, talking to me about something that happened 78 years ago. And when he talks to me about it, it feels like it happened yesterday. And for him to sit with it is incredibly uncomfortable. For me, I've never worked with somebody in this way where time has healed all the wounds. To me, it's always a combination of work and time, of energy and effort. And this is why I think when we're looking at whoever's watching this or any work that I do, to me, the most important thing is cultivating the self-compassion piece, right? This piece of, if your daughter, right? You have a daughter?
Mm-hmm.
If your daughter falls and hurts herself and she's crying, you would hold her. You wouldn't say, okay, stop, get rid of this. Like you'd say, you let her cry and you let her have that experience of crying. She's hurt. But with ourselves, we're not like that ever. We're like, suck it up. Like, you have it so much better than your neighbor. Your neighbor is like going through a divorce and doing this. And like, what do you have to be stressed about? And we're like so mean to ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think you also mentioning how we don't want to sit in these ugly emotions and these thoughts. There's some painful stuff there, and it's not intuitive for us to lean into this type of thing, right? It's actually more intuitive to push it away, to distract ourselves, right? And even I think, even when we think we're being good friends, like we have a friend who's upset, often the first thing we try to do is either distract them, change the topic,
right?
Figure out a solution. Oh, you're sad, I want to make you not sad, right? And we think we're being good friends and good people, and I'm sure our intentions are great. So it's hard for a lot of us, I think, to wrap our mind around, well, how is this going to help me if I sit in this, right?
But our culture is really connected to future, right? I work with a lot of youth still, and I work with children who are in grade 7, 8 in my office bawling because they don't know what they want to do when they're for college, university. And I'm like, you're 13. Of course you don't know. But their mind is so oriented in that because then they have to know what stream they want to go into, which is completely future oriented. So, as fixers, when you have a friend that comes over and they're sad or frustrated, we're like, let's just keep them busy, or let's go out and party. Let's, have some drinks, and then that will make things better. Wrong. That's a depressant. Right. And then what ends up happening is like, so then all of a sudden you walk away from your friend who you're trying to help. And then all of a sudden you're taking on her energy, you're literally feeling her stuff. Right. And this is a common experience when I work with people. So when they go into, it's work related or family related, when they share space with somebody, they end up taking on other people's stuff. Right. And it just sticks to them like Velcro. Yeah. Right. And then hold that. And for me, this is always when I'm trying to implement, I don't like the word trying, to implement the practice of self-compassion, saying that, this is really hard for me as a practitioner, or this is really hard for me as a parent to see my child sick. But that's not what we do. Like very recently, I was doing some work in Bruce County, and I was working with their paramedic team, and I was there for 3 or 4 days, and then I came home to Stratford for literally one night, and then I was back to Windsor for 3 days training their health unit. And I don't like to do that, but it's just kind of how the schedule worked. So I was home with my boys, and then I was gone. I saw them, once in 8 days. And as I'm driving to Windsor, I had this like wave of sadness hit me. I was like, oh, I'm really gonna like miss not seeing them. I've only seen them for X amount of hours in 8 days. This kind of sucks. And right away, my mind was like, shut up. You are doing what you love. Like, stop whining. And I was trying to like replace, you know, my sadness for not seeing my kids with money and like, oh, well, now you know, I'm kind of doing well in my business, so you should be happy with that. The reality is I can be proud of what I'm doing, but also be sad I'm not seeing my kids.
Right.
I thought right there, if my wife was next in the car, who I've been with, you know, for 21 years, and if I said to her, shut up, if she was like, well, I'm sad, I've only seen the kids once in 8 days, I would never say, shut up, you're making money, who cares? And say, yeah, of course you miss your kids, you love them and we made them, and this is like part of getting connected with humans. When we are away from them, we miss them. I would not tell her to shut up because she's making money.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. It's really helpful to talk to ourselves the way we would a loved one or a dear friend.
Exactly. You know, and for me, and why I'm so passionate about this practice is because it completely changed how I see things. It completely changed my friendships, and it completely changed how I can be present with people. But most importantly, it changed my relationship with myself, which I'm most excited about.
Mm. So I wondered sorry to cut you off there, but in your experience, just getting back to how so many of us are, again, uncomfortable to sit in those emotions. In your experience, do you find practicing more regularly mindfulness and meditation, does that almost give, say, those uglier feelings or emotions less power? Or
yeah, it's, you basically, instead of them coming in, you're like, oh my god, no, I don't want to be here, right? Because that was my first experience. Is that I'd be out golfing or having a good time, I'd have this intrusive thought come in, and I'd be like, no, you're ruining my day. Now this thought comes in, I'm like, yeah, just a thought. Okay, next. Comes in again. Okay, cool. Comes in loud, and it's like, you know, shaking things around. I'm like, yeah, cool, just a thought.
Right. I've heard that as well about physical pain.
Exactly. You know, recently, the study that, you know, I worked in addictions for 7 years, and opiates, self-reported, reduced pain with people long-term chronic pain, 25%-ish self-reported. After doing an 8-week practice of mindfulness, typically the MBSR program, mindfulness-based stress reduction program, up to 72% reduction, or 74%, reduction in pain. Why is that? Why do that little, you can see the diagram that I drew? That's why. People have physical pain, but they go to the story of the pain. You know, if you have, and you, all of yous, have these thoughts and like about or that we should have or could have, when that comes forward into your awareness, we do this to it because like, I don't want to deal with this again. The reality is, if you invite it in for this tea, or you, like I talked about holding it like this, if you could hold it like this, it's still there, but we're not holding it so tight. It's all about what you do, right? It's like, one time my in-laws came and they just like this pop and visit, and I thought, well, I could hide from them, even though I really love them. They're like good humans. I could hide from them and just like not pretend that I'm home, or I can invite them in for tea or a beer and that, right? And it's how you do that. There's nothing mindfulness doesn't touch. You know, everything that you put in, you're putting into this like mindfulness cooker, right? Like a mindfulness Instapot, so to speak. And everything cooks at different rates over time. So this may be thought or emotion that you're dealing with that is hard or challenging. That's not going to be worked with in 2 days. That might take 3, 5, 6 weeks. Might take 2 months. I don't know, right? But the stuff that comes to the surface wants to be addressed. People say, I meditate and I fall asleep. It means you're tired. I know that's not rocket science, but you're tired. And that's what's coming to the surface. Well, I meditate anxious. Well, you're okay. It wants to be addressed. Like, I'm not a rocket scientist. I teach very simple practices, but they're counterintuitive to how we're wired.
Right.
If it was easy, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's, I always say, the difference between easy and simple, right? There's a simplicity there, doesn't mean it's easy. Another question that came in,
sure.
Marianne asks, you mentioned 2 practices. So you mentioned the gratitude and the PEM. Yeah. She says, are there more?
Oh, Marianne, is that?
Yeah, I think Marianne.
Miriam?
I might be mispronouncing it. Marianne. Sorry,
Okay.
Marianne.
M. So yes, there's hundreds of more practices. But if you are a first timer or you're a beginner, let's say, right? What I would typically start with is gratitude, the PEM, and then I would start with the body scan, which is available on my site. There's at least 20 meditations on my site. If you go to mindfulmike.ca and then when we go to resources, meditation, they're all there. Don't scroll down to the very bottom and do like forgiveness or letting go or the heavy ones. Start with, if you're a beginner or new to this, start with the first 4 or 5 and then see how that resonates with you. But yes, there's lots more practices.
And another question kind of tied into that is, we've spoken, of course, a lot about mindfulness and meditation. Is there a difference between mindfulness and meditation? I often kind of hear them used interchangeably.
Yeah.
And also, you were mentioning before, we did a couple of the practices, informal and formal practices. Can you also
Sure.
touch on the difference between those two and what that looks like?
So to me, in the experience, that mindfulness is a form of meditation, but you can also use mindfully informally throughout the life, which is why I do it. So a formal practice is, let's say for beginners, putting your earbuds in, pressing play, listening to the guided practice. For those who have a deeper practice or have been practicing longer, maybe you're just watching your breath by yourself. Vipassana is one of the most common worldwide. But there's also, TM, which is a form of meditation. There's, you can listen to mantras. But that formal practice is actually listening and doing the like typical thing. Informal practice is using the practice in life, in real time. So Aaron says something to me that makes me frustrated, angry, upset. I identify that, okay, physically, I feel tense. Emotionally, I feel anger. Mentally, I'm neutral. It doesn't change what she said, but it changes my ability, instead of coming back at her, right? And saying, right? But you can use this informally thing with your children or your partner. Informally, you're with somebody you love, PEM. Drop in and say, okay, physically, how do I feel when I'm with this loved one? Emotionally, how do I feel? Mentally, what's my experience? Make sense-ish?
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. And just piggybacking onto that with the morning practice you were talking about and starting our mornings with gratitude. Can you just elaborate a little bit on why having a morning practice is important, you feel? Like, some people often ask, is there an optimal time to meditate? Is there a better time to do this?
Great questions. These get me really excited in my mindfulness nerd brain, okay? So there's not a best time to practice. If you were like a night owl and you want to practice when your little humans are asleep, or mid-sized humans or big human are asleep, then practice at night. I like to work with statistics, and you're statistically more likely to get a practice done first thing in the morning. Why is this? Well, when we start our day, we have this amount of willpower. And then when we get our kids ready for school and this happens and we drain it, then we deal with frustrating clients, patients, humans, and then our willpower is really slipping. So statistically speaking, at the end of a hard work day, you're less likely to do something for self-care, like workout. You're more likely to go like, I don't really friggin' feel like cooking. Let's go to fill in the blank fast food place on the way home. You are more likely, statistically speaking, to make poor choices as your day goes on. So that's why I recommend that we do this bookend practice. So we wake up in the morning and we do the practice of gratitude or a mindful check-in, one of those two, both on my site. Before bed, we do a body scan for 2 reasons. One, it ends our day and it's more of like a processing practice, but also it's a great practice to get our mind and body ready for sleep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And I heard you also mention before about the time that you want to devote to your practice. I think you said around 12 to 25 minutes.
Yeah, so 12 is so the numbers of the MBSR program, the magic number was 27 minutes a day, but I don't want to start there with a beginner mind, because 27 minutes a day might feel like 17 hours, right? So I like to start short and sweet. The reason I think I'm fairly successful in teaching this for a living is that I don't BS people. I'm like, I live a fairly normal life, right? As normal as a meditation teacher can be. And I like to look at practically, we can do 5 minutes. Practically, you can ask yourself, how am I feeling physically, emotionally, mentally? Practically, on your drive to work, if you drive, well, London traffic, let's say, or you're driving in KW or Windsor or wherever you are in life, and you have a commute to work, you can spend 5 minutes of that day asking yourself, how am I doing? Or paying attention to your breath as you drive.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Yeah.
course, right? That right there, you are slowly getting that time in. So it's not that Erin wakes up and then she does 27 minutes straight and she's good for the day. It's that she wakes up and does a 5-minute practice. She has a commute to work, 5 or 10 minutes, drive to work schedule. When she gets to work, she says, how am I feeling physically, emotionally, mentally? At lunch, you ask yourself that. On your drive home again, you spend 5 or 10 minutes purposely paying attention to your breath. We're over half an hour already there.
Yeah.
This is something that we can do as a human who has time built in. Oh, this makes sense, Mike. I'll do it. Cool. You're going to have resistance. Go like, I want to listen to, like, I want to do carpool karaoke and sing said song. Or you're going to go, well, we'll do it when we get home. Or I don't really want to do it in the morning because it makes me kind of upset. You're going to make up all these BS reasons why you don't want to meditate. And I promise I've heard them all. If you send me a new one to my website I haven't heard, I'll give you 6 free sessions. I've heard it all. I promise you.
But we have a few people out there that are maybe going to try to think of some now. Send them to you. But yeah, there's no shortage of them.
Oh, it's not. I literally think I've heard them all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I think getting started obviously is the hardest part. And I like how you talked about there not being, unicorns and rainbows at the other end of it, because we do want instant gratification, especially in today's world. And so we go, well, if I meditate, I want to notice the benefit right away. I want to see that magic. Would you say, though, that people can start at least noticing some difference fairly soon on? I know there's probably no magic timeline, but
yeah, 3 are roughly, statistically speaking, you have aha moments in the 3rd to 4th week.
Okay.
This sucks for you people. You have to trust me. You're like, oh, well, and I'm biased, is all I do for a living. But it takes at least 3 or 4 weeks, which is so different. Let's say that someone's eating an unhealthy lifestyle and they go like plant-based diet all of a sudden, and all they're eating is carbs and sugar. They're going to feel so clear, the clarity, and so much better, so much faster. But 3 or 4 weeks of waking up early and listening to my voice and having to do this and make this in your schedule, you're going to have more resistant to it. And it takes at least 3 weeks to see these aha moments.
Yeah.
FYI.
Yeah, I've also heard someone say, or probably many people say, it's like training for a marathon. You're not just going to get out your door tomorrow if you've never run before and enter in the marathon and expect to do well at it, right? I mean, unless you have like super genetics or something, it's probably not going to happen.
I think I did the math. I've talked to over 100,000 people the last 5 years in workshops. I've had one person in all those people come up and go, I heard you talk. I went home, I practiced. It was amazing. So I think that's the odds. But in my experience, 1 in 100,000 have this experience where like, I got it, because you typically don't. It's a workout for your mind. And if you're conditioned to be future or past, and conditioned to observe the negative or to watch, not because you're a negative human, because this is how we're hardwired so that we're survive. We have to remember ancestors are the ones that were like always looking over their back in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Hardwiring, but now we just live a different life and we're worried about other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And like you say, it's like a muscle, the muscle of the mind. You have to work it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Another question that I came up with before, and then we can wrap up. I don't know if there was any more practices you wanted to go through or walk us through.
I'll talk about it, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay. With anchors, you mentioned using the breath as an anchor.
Yeah.
You may have mentioned a couple others as well. Could you touch on other types of anchors? And do you find when people start, is using the breath as an anchor the easiest or the best way to start?
So there's really only 3 anchors in the practice of mindfulness that I teach, and it's breath, body, and then sound. Now, sound I don't even attempt. With adults, with little humans, first thing I use, I have them tune into sound. But because sound's so impermanent, if we were to pay attention to sound, your mind's gonna get caught in thought and like, what's that noise? Is that my kid running upstairs? Da, 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 da. More narrative is created. So for breath, fairly simple. Here, simple in theory. Here, back. Most common experience with that, I'm not breathing as deep as like Sally next to me. It's like, don't try to control your breath. We're just breathing. You've been doing it for X amount of years. You've been doing it fine. This is what we're doing. The next one is body. That's more of like the body scan, right? Where you're just purposely paying attention to your body. So you would start like maybe at your forehead or, your eyes relaxing down into your shoulders. And we purposely shine a light of awareness on that body part.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. And sorry, Mike, did you say there's a practice you wanted to wrap up with?
Yeah, I want to talk about practice, and then we can go do the thing.
Sure.
So the first rule of Mindful Mike's rule is be kind to yourself. This is not an easy process, so I suggest that you be kind to yourself. You don't beat yourself up if you miss a day. This is not a mortgage payment. You miss it and you pay it tomorrow. You missed it. That's cool. Tomorrow's the next day. You can't double up on your practice and that makes up for lost time. Totally fine. What I like to do, again, morning practice. So for that one, what I'm recommending is the gratitude check-in, or there's one on my site called the mindful check-in. Either one, start your day with. Wake up, press play. Then on your drive into work or walk or bike into work, spend a couple of minutes purposely paying attention to your breath. Breathing. Mind has a thought, back. Breathing, thought, back. Thought, back to breath. Okay, we just spend a couple minutes doing that. Then we ask ourselves throughout the day a couple times, how am I feeling physically? How am I feeling emotionally? How am I feeling mentally? Good, bad, and ugly. I like to set a random timer for like every 207 minutes it goes off. And then I just go, check in, boom, boom, boom. Before bed, I recommend the body scan, which is more of a practice of helping to reduce anxiety, but also let the body somatically rest before bed. Kind of going into the physicality of being present or laying down and purposely kind of paying attention to that. That's where I suggest we start for that. Again, you can go to mindfulmike.ca and you go to resources, meditations, they're all there 100% free. If you have questions about the practice, feel free to message me via my site, contact Mike, or I just started Instagram. You can do that, which is Mindful Masse, Masse. You can do that as well. And that's
awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Mike. And I just realized I pronounced your last name incorrectly when I introduced you. So.
Well, it's not. It's only incorrect for people that live in London. So my family that lives in Zurich and Huron County all say Masse. So
okay. So I get a pass then because I'm not in London. So there we go.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time tonight. I think you've given folks some really practical tools they can take away and not feel too overwhelmed with it. And you've given them what to expect from their practice. Again, it's not going to be this unicorn and sunshine and rainbows. It's going to be hard. It's going to be boring. You're going to fight it. But just some really easy tools and techniques that people can start with, at least, to get them into this kind of practice that doesn't feel overwhelming. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us. If you stayed on this long, thank you, and have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Ciao.
Good night.